Welcome to the Late Night Cool Down. I'm your host, Kyle Antoine, and it's less than an hour before this will be uploaded. At the time of recording, it is currently 9:01 p.m. and this releases at 10 p.m. So let's try and get everything, assembled in this episode, and hopefully you leave feeling empowered and inspired to create the change first within yourself, and then that change will reverberate to the outside world. As within, so without. And I want to apologize for my voice. I sound like Joey Diaz, and I sound like I've been smoking a pack of smokes for 80 years, which is kind of true, but I'm not 80, I'm 21. So let's get into it. I want to start off by talking about how, our rights and our freedoms were, specifically put in our constitutions to ensure that we could maintain transparent and hopefully as not corrupt as possible government. So in Canada, this is directly from justice.gc.ca, like a Canadian federal website, right? Everyone in Canada is free to practice any religion or no religion at all. We are also free to express religious beliefs through prayer or by wearing religious clothing, for example. However, the Charter also ensures that others also have the right to express their religious beliefs in public. We are free to think our own thoughts, speak our minds, listen to views of others, and express our opinions in creative ways. We're also free to meet with anyone we wish and participate in peaceful demonstrations. This includes the right to protest against a government action or institution. And the stories that I'm going to tell you talk about how just through words alone, so this isn't talking about, terrorist organizations, changing, the country they're in, but people and individuals who, through their own words and their voice, spoken or written, change fundamentally the way that we view things and the way society runs, okay? So, however, these freedoms are not unlimited. There may be limits on how you express your religious beliefs if your way of doing so would infringe on the rights of others or undermine complex public programs and policies. For example, you may have religious reasons to object having your photo taken for your driver's license, but this requirement may be linked to a need to stop others from unlawfully using your identity. In addition, the Charter does not protect expression such as hate speech that involves threats of violence or that takes the form of violence. The media also have certain fundamental freedoms and are free to print and broadcast news and other information. The government can only limit what the media prints for justifiable reasons set out in law. For example, a magazine cannot print slander, which is an untrue statement about a person that may hurt his or her reputation. In Canada, every citizen has the right to vote in elections and to run for public office themselves. There are certain exceptions. For example, people must be 18 years old or older in order to vote. Our elected governments cannot hold power for an unlimited amount of time. The Charter requires governments to call an election at least once every 5 years. An election could be delayed, however, during a national emergency like a war. In this case, 2/3 of the members of the House of Commons, or in the case of provinces or territories, the Legislative Assembly must agree to delay the election. The Charter must make it clear that elected representatives of legislative assemblies must sit at least once a year. This holds Parliament and all other legislators responsible for their actions. So, why are these rights important, and why are they outlined in the Constitution or the Charter of rights and freedoms like that? It's because our whoever fucking drafted this shit was smart and wise. This belief has been somewhat lost or cast aside that our governments are working for you, working for the common people, and not you, us. And especially in the United States of America. The current administration seems to think that, they are all above the law. And that's just not the case. And, it's outlined in, the United States' amendments. So free speech in the USA is protected by the First Amendment, prohibiting government, not private employers, from limiting expression, including speech, press, assembly, and petition. It covers most speech, including unpopular views, but excludes categories like true threats, defamation, fraud, and speech that incites imminent lawless action. The First Amendment prohibits Congress and government entities from passing laws that abridge speech. It does not apply to private employers who can regulate employee speech. The Supreme Court has affirmed that many forms of expression are protected, including symbolic speech like burning a flag, and offensive speech. Certain types of speech are not protected, like obscenity, child pornography, true threats and fighting words, defamation, libel and slander, speech that incites imminent lawless action, and fraud and perjury. So approximately 82% of Americans lack or have severely limited free speech protection at their workplace. There is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment, but hate crimes involving violence or intimidation can be punished. And schools and universities have complex rules regarding speech, balancing student rights against the need for a productive educational environment. So the reason why these are important is because these are outlined in the foundational laws and ways that we govern our people, our society, and the government itself. These are fundamental. Nobody is above this. Nobody is outside the law. That includes billionaires, or the richest families on earth, or any politician, anyone. They cannot limit your free speech. And the reason they do it, in my view, is so that, words, become ideas, and ideas become action, and action becomes change. And enough people, speak out, and then they start thinking, and then they start gathering, then if it's not in the best interest of these people that we have, put in these high positions, they don't want you doing that. They don't want you talking about, how can we prosecute the people in the Epstein files? How? Why wasn't, most of the people named prosecuted or outed way before? The victims of the Epstein files want, people charged and held accountable, and for the whole full thing to be released, unredacted. So in my opinion, for the most part, in Canada, we have a pretty good, free, open press and government for the most part. More so than other countries, for sure. But we could definitely do a bit better. And one of the ways that, and this is coming from a First Nations 21-year-old male in Canada. First Nations. So I, have respect for the Canadian government and for the Canadian people. I, too, am a Canadian citizen. I, too, am a Toquat Nation citizen, which is my nation. And I just want to say I do respect the Canadian government because, protect freedom of protection and rights, and, to me, the idea of Canada and the way that we live in our society is helping one Canadian, I'm a Canadian, helping another Canadian, making sure that, the mother down the road doesn't starve and her children don't starve, and ensuring that people can pay to live, not just survive, but to fucking live. And people use words to divide us, like Pierre Polyev. I hate when politicians, say this side against that side, or we're us against them. It's no, we are all Canadian. Let's fucking figure it out together. We are not on opposite ends of the team or the spectrum. We are on the fucking same team. The policies that we implement today are going to impact our future generations down the line. And they have to live with whatever we decide for them. I'm trying not to rush because I want for this to be cohesive. I'm also a bit sick, and it's getting late, and it's a bit cold. I'm outside, but I'm going to try and make it all, tie it all together without being too, over the map. And same with Donald Trump. Words and name calling and manipulation and gaslighting are, cornerstones of a fucking dictator. And I don't take that word lightly, but people who think that they have unlimited, unchecked power are going to do things outside of the law, just naturally. So people like Pam Bondi, the fucking, Governor General, or not Governor General, Attorney General, the fucking, press secretary for Trump, like, who the fuck do they think they are? Obviously, no one gave them a fucking reality check. And, I hope the American people do. And I think it's almost time for the American people to use their fucking Second Amendment rights? Something like that. I should I should fucking check. But, the right to bear arms and to, overthrow a corrupt government. Speech like this is what they want to censor. The American government wants the American government to keep going, but do the American people really want this current government, who on paper is perfect, as perfect as you could get for a human society? And that is in terms of having a democracy and, electing representatives to represent, where you live, and having, the world's largest economy, and, all of these rights and freedoms to say how you feel, do as you do, so long as you don't hurt others or yourself, right? On paper, it sounds really good, but the problem is it's not being used, it's not being run that way. The people who are supposed to uphold and enforce our laws, our rights, and our Constitution, not just in the States, but in Canada, they are going exactly against it. And obviously, if a bunch of child fuckers, cannibalistic, evil, fucking wicked, twisted, all of these fucking, insane people can walk away scot-free, then that's not a justice system. That's not justice. As this case was going on, the Epstein files, the Jeffrey Epstein case, as these things were going on, it should have immediately been made public. Who was involved? Who did it? Who is Jeffrey Epstein? Who is Ghislaine Maxwell? And fucking fuck that bitch too. Ghislaine Maxwell can go, oh my God. And let's stay on topic. And so the point is, they use words like, there's so many that shell shock turned into PTSD. Someone comes back from the war, they don't got shell shock anymore, they got PTSD. PTSD is a very clinical fucking term, and it doesn't give you the description feeling that shell shock, that when you hear shell shock, oh, what does that mean? Oh, that means that they were constantly being bombed, or, seeing people bombed, that it literally shocked their system to a point where, though they're not actually fighting now, they're home, they still got, they're shocked still because it was so fucking traumatizing. Just these PC, political correctness terms used in the media and used by politicians to, minimize the things that they're talking about are, it's an injustice to the people. When a celebrity or a politician is fucking kids, penetrating, sometimes babies, sometimes teenagers, but these are children. Call it for what it fucking is. I gotta do, there's so many files out now, but I know we'll do an episode on the Epstein files, but these are things that are pertinent to, this topic of the power of your voice, because Drewski just released, a skit, obviously he didn't say Erica Kirk, but it was obviously Erica Kirk, that he was impersonating, and, that side of the fucking political arena want to try and, shame Drewski for, the skit. And it's like, no, like, he literally, it wasn't even defamatory. It wasn't slander, because it was exactly what happened in real life. And it was a commentary and a comedic commentary on, Erica Kirk. And you don't get to lecture, the quote-unquote left or the quote-unquote political correct on, not having a sense of humor, and then, turn around and when we do it back and we make fun of you and your beliefs, and, get mad at it and shame it and try to shut it down. And that's the same shit with Charlie Kirk when he died. God bless him. I don't agree with, some of the things he said, but also there were some things that I did agree with. I don't consider myself left or right. I consider myself for the people, by the people. That means whatever's in the best interest, positive interest for the people of the country, that's what I'm for. I don't care what party or, political background or whatever. If you're fighting for the people, if you're making lives more manageable for the citizens, if you are that's who I'm for, right? And I exist kind of outside of the whole spectrum, like left, right, fucking Republican, Democrat, conservative, fucking, liberal. And it's like, I don't give a fuck. What policies are you going to implement that are going to make gas cheaper, that makes it so, families aren't spending, $1,000 a week at the fucking grocery store just to fucking eat? What policies are going to protect the rights of our children? I'm getting a bit carried away, and this episode has to release in 40 minutes. So I want to do a justice for this episode. And I am sort of doing that by just, typically I try not to swear. I really don't try to swear. I try to sound a bit more proper. But I want to, kind of just lay on the fact that this is Canada, and we shouldn't be afraid to have a difference of opinion. We shouldn't be afraid to think outside the status quo, because these people, the media, the politicians, the ultra rich and wealthy, they don't even want you to fucking think, period, let alone think differently. They just want you to mindlessly consume whatever narrative that they're throwing in your fucking face that day. Oh, the Epstein files? Okay, let's go fucking bomb a foreign country. The Epstein files? Oh, let's look over here. Let's go send ICE to go kill some more innocent fucking American lives. And innocent lives, period. This is the First Nations land. This is native fucking land. And don't anyone ever fucking forget that. And no one on colonized land, on illegal land, is illegal, right? My perspective as an Indigenous person is, as long as you're not criminal, as long as you're not destroying the fucking planet, I don't care, you can fucking hang out. You can come hang out on Turtle Island, okay? That's my opinion. So, fuck ICE, fuck Trump, fuck Pierre Poilievre. What the fuck has Pierre Poilievre done? And let's bring him back into Canada, because fuck Pierre Poilievre. And you know what? Fuck Joe Rogan. Let's hone in on Joe Rogan for a second. You don't get to flip-flop between, helping getting Donald Trump elected to, maybe he's a bad guy because, he said ICE and he fucking shot an innocent mother. And he had ICE shoot, and it's not even, they're hiring people. They're hiring people who are already radical, who are already borderline terroristic, racist, people who are on a fucking high horse because they got their fucking God elected in office and think that they're above the law. I hope, it is my hope and prayer, that all, sane U.S. politicians hold all of these dumb motherfuckers accountable and lock them in jail for the rest of their life. No death penalty. You get to rot in a fucking cell for the rest of your godforsaken fucking life. And you get to look the people, the families of the people that you took their lives from in the eyes as you face the rest of your life in prison. Same with fucking Trump. And I also want to express clearly that I'm not a Tucker Carlson, and I'm not Candace Owens. I'm not, in general, a political commentator. But I am someone who believes in the Canadian and the American people, and I believe that we can do a lot fucking better than what we've elected into office. And I also want to touch on the fact that, our right to freedom, our rights and our freedoms to, express ourselves and voice our opinion and to vote are so critical that, we've been led to believe that our vote doesn't matter. And I believe the PSYOP online is, they're all playing for the same team. It doesn't matter if you vote left or right or this party or that party. It's all for the same thing. That's like, no, if we had a bunch of JFKs, not, himself, but people like JFK in office for a fucking, generation consecutively, we'd see massive improve, change, positive change in the world. I loathe people who say, I don't vote, I don't get involved in politics. And it's like, you are a dumb ass motherfucker if you don't vote. And more so if you do not vote and you complain about our society. You are the fucking problem. We don't get Trump in office for people not... We got Trump in office because, A, people didn't vote, but also, B, there was a massive fucking campaign paid for and backed by not just Trump, but other billionaires and other corporations, and possibly, and this is speculation, but other foreign countries, aka Israel, allegedly, it was in their best interest to have him elected over Kamala Harris. And if you think Kamala Harris was going to do a worse job, a fucking highly educated, well-rounded individual who was a fucking, lawyer, this high fucking, tier lawyer in California, and you think, Trump is doing a way better job than Kamala could have, you are out of your goddamn mind. That's just not the fucking case. Welcome to the real... And, oh yeah, I gotta say, the United States is one of the least educated per capita, country in the fucking world. How are you the richest country in the world, but you have the least educated amount of people? Canada is like number fucking one. So I gotta, kind of dial it back for the Americans. I'm not saying the Americans are stupid. I'm not saying they don't know what's going on, but I am saying when you're coming from an educated country and coming from education just in general, you have a greater perspective on the way things are. Education, this is another PSYOP. Education is the most important thing and tool to get people out of poverty. We just did a whole fucking episode on it. The ticket out of poverty is education. You don't see wealthy families telling their kids they don't have to go to school because it's just a waste of time. The only people who tell you that education doesn't actually matter, a university degree is worthless, are people who benefit from your ignorance and your arrogance, because arrogance is born out of not knowing enough. You think you know enough, but you don't, and that's fucking arrogance. And I am passionate about this because politics isn't fucking politics. It's decisions that influence the way that we live today. It influences the prices we pay. It influences what we tolerate, what we allow in this country. And if you want to play the I don't get involved in politics, then check your privilege. If you have the privilege to not worry about the gas price, if you have the privilege to not worry about the food price or who's in office, because your life doesn't change regardless, then you are a problem. And I hope that you find the solution in educating yourself on why it's important to participate in a democracy. You know, there could have been 10 lives just in fucking January that could still be here if people voted differently. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. Your voice has the potential to change society fundamentally. I'm not saying we can change the world, but we can change ourselves, and then through that inner self change, that changes the world. We are the fucking world. Human beings make up the majority. We are the most intelligent on earth. We are the most creative on earth. We are the only ones who have complex societies that are interconnected globally. We are the earth in that context. We are not the earth, the world. Canada has $1 trillion economy. The United States, just south, has over a $20 trillion economy. We are some of the richest countries in the world. And we don't think that our choices affect other places in the world. Like, Canada is a refuge for people fleeing the countries that they can't have a life in. You know, it's a privilege for me to be sitting on a fucking bench in a park, you know, almost 10 at night, and not have to worry about a bomb going off near me or getting stabbed. I mean, not in most, but in some cases, you do have to worry. But thankfully, like, I'm in a place of privilege where I don't have to worry about that. We get so caught up in our first world issues, and I didn't mean for this to get into this kind of thing, but I'm gonna roll with it. We get so caught up in our day-to-day that we don't have time to, you know, care or to worry about people who are being bombed. Free Palestine. You know, that's not just, you know, fuck Israel or fuck the Jewish people. Let's not degrade and, you know, full-on genocide this population who's been there, you know, for thousands of years. Not just after World War II, when Britain and the United States came together and made Israel. You know, most of the people in Israel are from North America or from Europe. And you're displacing the indigenous population. Did you know, before Israel was created, the different religions and the cultures there did live in harmony? When you add in this other factor and things go to shit, I wonder what it is, right? I wonder. You know, is Israel the problem? Is that, you know, am I gonna get, you know, black? I don't even, like, let's not get into Israel because that's not the topic. But the point is, when, you know, governments use dehumanizing language, a foreigner, or, you know, third world country, first world country, it creates this separation in our mind that distances us from the problem. And in North America, we also have the privilege of literally being distanced from a lot of the world issues. We don't see mass poverty like we do in Africa or in the Middle East. We don't see bombs being, you know, dropped. We are distanced from the problem, literally by hundreds or thousands of miles of water. We are in some of, like, you know, the safest countries that you could be on earth right now. Our biggest threat to our civilizations in this you know, time is ourselves. And I have a lot of respect for the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And I don't worship politicians. I don't, like that. Like, let's keep it simple. I don't worship politicians, but I do like politicians, and I don't like politicians. Certain politicians I like, some I don't. Mark Carney, from my, from my perspective, he's doing an amazing job. He's meeting with, international countries. He's meeting with other countries, setting up trade agreements, deepening our relations. He's navigating Donald Trump, pretty well for, how you could deal with Trump. I just saw TikTok literally an hour or so ago, where he's at a music award show. I think it was an award show, but a lot of different Canadian bands and artists were there, and he was excited. And the reporter asked him why he was there, and he went into how he loves Canadian, art and music. And then I look in the comments, and of course people are like, isn't there better things to be going on that you could be doing? And it's like, motherfucker, I should just fucking change the episode name. I hope this is good. But motherfucker, we want a prime minister who's involved in our society, who loves Canadians. That's what we want. Every other fucking day of the week, he's out or in the office getting shit done. What has Pierre Poilievre done in his 20 fucking 1 years of, time in government? Not much. I can't think of one thing that was consequential that he's done, let alone positive, other than fucking bite an apple on some stupid political ad. Or, well, it was turned into a political ad, but it was an interview. So, I'm going to hope and pray that this kind of lands the way I want it to, and not just a bunch of political shit. So, we're going to pivot, and we're going into stories. So, this person was born into the brutal system of American chattel slavery in 1818. Frederick Douglass was a man who was legally defined as property. At a time when teaching an enslaved person to read was a criminal act punishable by violence, Douglass understood that literacy was the first step toward sovereignty. After teaching himself to read in secret, Douglass escaped to the north. The powers that be at that time claimed that people of African descent were biologically incapable of complex thought. Douglass didn't just argue against this, he dismantled it. He became one of the most famous orators in the world. When he stood on a stage, his voice was so powerful and his logic so sharp that he forced the public to realize that the system of slavery wasn't just cruel, it was logical fallacy built on a lie. Now, this is a story of a slave, 1800s America, in paper, on writing, legally defined as property. Do you know how insane that is? And then to reinforce that lie, they made it illegal for anyone to teach them how to read because they knew it was a lie. The people who wrote the fucking law knew it was a lie. And that's the important thing. Like they say, don't talk about your salary as well. I'm just branching off the idea or the story, but on an idea. They say, don't talk about your salary at work. Don't ask someone how much money they make. Don't ask your coworkers. Why? Because if you ask a coworker how much they make and they make more than you doing the same job, you're going to go to management and be like, what the fuck? Right? So, open and free, responsible expression of, thoughts and words and ideas is important and crucial, especially international thoughts and opinions, and words. Why? Because our great societies that we live in today was not made by the white man, was not made by the Indian, Native American. It was not made by the Chinese. It was a cross-cultural thing going on, and, it became what it is today. It wasn't just one white man or white men from Europe. It was, cross-pollination of all of these different cultures and ideas that came together to form what we have today. There is power in diversity. And that's another fucking lie that Trump has done is, DEI. What is DEI? It just means that if we have someone who is of a lower income, who has the same credentials as someone who's, typically white, who they would choose. DEI just ensures that you look over every applicant equally, and that, maybe you hire the one who is less fortunate. Still fully qualified, this just the same as the white wealthy one. And I say white wealthy because that's why how he's framing it is that, he says, I don't care who flies the plane, I just want someone who is qualified. They're all qualified. The airlines wouldn't look into them if they didn't have the same credentials or the same level of experience or training. Words matter. And he painted it like it was weird. We're just going to pick someone because they're black or they're not they're not white. So we're just going to pick them. That's not what it was about. Anyways, I digress. Let's move on to the next story. So, in the early 20th century, India was under the thumb of the British Empire, the most powerful military force on the planet at that time. The empire stayed in power by convincing the Indian people that British rule was inevitable and that resistance was futile. Gandhi was a London-trained lawyer who realized that the British could only rule India if the Indian people agreed to be ruled. He used his voice to introduce, and I'm going to say this to the best of my ability, Satyagraha, or truth force. He didn't call for an army. He called for the vocal withdrawal of consent. By speaking the truth that a nation of 300 million cannot be ruled by a few thousand if they simply stop obeying, he collapsed the moral authority of the empire without firing a single shot. So now, after reading that story, I said, the American government should the American people should overthrow their American government, or the current American government. So how do we go about this? I'm not calling for January 6th, 2020. I am just saying, figure it out, guys. Hold people accountable. Vote better. As much as you can, get educated. And if the current U.S. government isn't working for you, they're working against you. And is that a government that you want to uphold? There's about 300 million people in the United States right now. And that's just, the quote-unquote legal people, right? Imagine how many, if the United States of America, the people, wanted to overthrow the current administration, and I'm not saying anarchy. I do not believe in anarchy. I do believe in true, honest, morally just and graceful law and order. I do believe in a system of governance or a system of living for, the people that it, is over or under. It's under. Because the government is supposed to serve the people, right? And so if your current government's not doing that, then what's the point of having that government? If they don't want to prosecute their friends because, for whatever reason seem to all be friends, then just an example would be just withdraw your consent. Be like, you're not the government anymore. Create your own new government. Maybe keep, the same fundamental, laws and rights and freedoms that you have now, and, start fucking new. You can keep the US dollar, or you just take the fucking thing, A government who acts against its people and outside the laws that it governs its own people by has become immoral, but also illegitimate. The U.S. as it is right now, the U.S. government as it is right now, is an illegitimate government who acts outside of the laws, who lies to the people, and who actively works against it. That is not a government. That is some semblance of a dictatorship. And I thought the American people were free, right? Let's move on. The voice of science in the context. So the context is, in the 1600s, the Roman Catholic Church was the ultimate power that be. They controlled the narrative of the entire universe, decreeing that the earth was the stationary center of all things. To disagree was not just an error, it was hearsay, punishable by death. Or not hearsay, heresy. I'm reading. Galileo was an astronomer who looked through a telescope and saw the truth. The earth moved around the sun. When the church forced him to kneel and recant his findings under threat of torture, he did so to save his life. But he stood up. He famously whispered, I'm going to butcher this, but "Et peut se mouve," and yet it moves. He chose to keep the voice of objective reality alive, sparking the scientific revolution and proving that a decree from an authority cannot change a fact of nature. And without him, maybe there would have been someone else down the line, but in this current timeline, without him, we would not have cars. You would not be listening to my podcast right now. You wouldn't have smartphones. We most likely wouldn't have been to the moon. That was one person who literally changed the course of human history and defined the lives we live today, because he dared question an institution that tried to enforce a certain perspective. And if you dared even think or question outside of the status quo, you could have been killed. Sounds a bit like, modern USA today. If you dare question an ICE officer, you better hope that it's on a good day, because the best you'll get is, you're going to get beat up and stomped. The worst you're going to get, and I don't know which one's worse, torture or death, but the worst you could get is you're fucking dead. You're gone. You're here, then you're not. So this was why, we can take this story and relate it to the modern world today. Dare to speak the truth. Not just your truth, not just your opinion, but the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is something undeniable. It is an undeniable fact that no human is illegal, especially no children are illegal. It's an undeniable fact that a president shouldn't have made, over, I think it was around $3 billion since his time in office. It's an undeniable fact that the United States shouldn't be bombing a Middle East country for a foreign government. It's an undeniable fact that people should be allowed and able to feed their families without going nearly bankrupt every week or month or day. It's an undeniable fact that we should be taking care of and treating with dignity and respect our homeless population, because these are also Canadian citizens. These are also American citizens who, for whatever reason, came into a position where they were sleeping on the fucking streets. And how dare people of Canada and the US look down on our fellow man and our fellow woman for being less fucking fortunate. You are no better just because you have a house to go to at the end of the night. You are no better because you can have a car. You know, these are privileges and luxuries that sadly they weren't able to attain. For whatever reason, it does not matter. But these are suffering people. And I want to point out that you have no moral right or justification or high horse to fucking get on to justify treating these people like shit. Because I've seen it and I've heard it, and it is despicable, and I would say borderline criminal to treat someone like that. Not that you should be punished by the law. Maybe some people should. But what I'm saying is, that's a Canadian citizen. They have the same rights, they have the same responsibilities, they have the same freedoms. They may be drug addicted or alcoholic or, dirty, or they smell bad. But I guarantee you that they, at some core level of them, they want the house, they want the stable life, they want the education, they want the job. They want to be a productive member of society. But addiction, systemic issues, because it is systemic. This isn't happens, like, there's a reason why they are there, and it's not just through their own volition. It's through a system that makes it incredibly difficult for people who are already in that situation, and especially if they've been in that situation for years and sometimes decades, to get themselves out of it, because it has to be an internal choice. And when their fellow citizens are treating them like fucking shit, it makes it a lot harder to want to change or to want to get out of there, because at some level they may also believe they deserve to be there, and nobody deserves to be hungry, alone, scared, cold, on the streets. People are dying. There's over a dozen people dying a day in downtown Vancouver alone. And you want to just brush them aside? Just because you have some money in your account and you have a house to go to and maybe you got some kids, that doesn't mean shit if you're a shitty fucking person. I digress. So in the 1840s, Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician working in Vienna maternity ward. At the time, doctors were seen as quote-unquote gentlemen of high status, yet women who were dying in their wards at terrifying rates were quote-unquote childbed fever. Semmelweis discovered that doctors were carrying quote-unquote invisible particles from autopsies directly to living patients because they weren't washing their hands. When he used his voice to tell the medical elite they were the cause of the deaths, they didn't thank him. They destroyed him. They couldn't handle the ugly truth that their status didn't make them immune to error. Semmelweis was silenced and driven out, but his voice planted the seed for modern germ therapy, eventually saving hundreds of millions of lives. And there is a price to pay to speak the truth in a society who wants you to shut the fuck up and not question anything and to sit down and to get back in line. But great countries aren't built on shutting the fuck up and sitting down and getting back in line. Great countries and great people are born and forged in the fire of the truth, of a vision, of a better way of living. Freedom comes at a price, and that price is responsibility. That price is sometimes death. I am not saying in Canada or in the States you're likely to die on your journey of bringing about a change within yourself and through society, through yourself, through your words, through peaceful action, because I do believe that we can change through peaceful action. We don't need to kill. We don't need to bomb. We don't need to threat. We need to speak of love, of tolerance, of compassion, of hope, of faith. Not religious faith, but faith that maybe we can trust that so long as we do our best collectively, we're going to get, the best that we can get. And in Canada, that best is going to be tremendously. We need to not think just in the present moment, but we need to think in 100 years from now. Where will Canada be? What decisions can we make right now in policy and in our personal lives and in society that will reverberate and have a positive effect for people who live in Canada 100 years down the line? The choices that we make are going to be felt by the people who aren't alive yet. When they look back to us today, are they going to be proud? Or are they going to be honored that their ancestors, which would be us, that their ancestors chose to take the risk and make a good, positive change, meaningful, positive change in society that they now get to live? Or are they going to wonder what the fuck happened and wonder why more people didn't stand up, why more people didn't speak the truth, why more people were tolerant of people getting murdered in the streets? Or homeless people on the streets, right? And so that story is from the 1840s. Almost 200 years later, it's just common knowledge now. If you don't wash your hands after you touch a dead body and you go touch, a living woman and maybe do surgery on them, that cross-contamination is going to fucking kill them. That's pretty common knowledge now. It wasn't, which is the point. What's common knowledge in 20 years or in 200 years isn't really common knowledge now, obviously. You listening could have the idea, the perspective, the voice that will impact society for the next, entirety of human history. Everything started with a word. Hey, let's go form a country. Let's go start the business. Let's go start the podcast. Let's go protest. It started with a thought, then it became words. That words was shared with others, and that others became a thing, and that thing became a thing, and that, it became bigger than ourselves. And that's the point of being alive, is that we create something that will impact society in a meaningful, positive way, and it becomes something bigger than ourselves. The next story is, in 2008, the Taliban took control of the Swat Valley in Pakistan. They were a violent regime that used fear to silence the population, specifically targeting girls by banning them from attending school. They knew that an uneducated population is a compliant population. Malala was only 11 years old when she began blogging for the BBC under a pseudonym about her desire for an education. As her voice grew, the Taliban tried to silence her permanently by attacking her on a school bus. She survived the attempt, and instead of retreating into the silence they demanded, she took her voice to the global stage. She proved that you can't kill an idea with a bullet, and her voice became the catalyst for international laws protecting a child's right to learn. And if you're in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s or your 50s or your 60s and you're like, I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't care what happens. I don't care who's in charge. It's all just Think back to this 11-year-old girl who has more audacity, more wit, more intelligence, more determination, more vision for a better life than you do, living in a privileged country on earth where people don't have the luxury of going to bed. They don't have a bed. They don't have the luxury of having breakfast with their grandpa. They don't have a fucking grandpa. They don't have a fucking restaurant. They don't have money. They have literally nothing. And this 11-year-old girl, in the face of a terrorist attack, instead of being silent or getting scared, she used her voice to affect change on an international stage and helped institute laws that protected our children. Our children. It takes a village. You know, we're in Canada. We're on planet motherfucking Earth, motherfucker. You know, I'm not free if there's someone across the globe who's not free. Does that make sense? I am not free until the last man or woman is freed. So long as there's a slave, so long as there's, unlawful imprisonment, so long as there is people scared to, speak their truth, then I am not free. Because if I can allow or tolerate or accept the enslavement of another person, it's just a matter of time before it comes back to me and I become a slave. Not just in the context of a literal slave, but a slave of the mind or the slave of the state. Think this way, speak this way, be this way. Don't think that, don't say that, don't be that, don't do that. I come from the perspective that we have fundamental, universal rights. A right to live a life of free will, self-determination, of love and light, harm to none. I am of the belief that the only ultimate authority is love. Does that mean I'm all lovey-dovey? No, that means that if you commit a crime, it's a loving act to hold you accountable to that crime. I'm of the belief that, love, which, can be called God. And I'm not getting religious, I'm getting spiritual. The one ultimate authority is God. Not in a religious or a Christian context per se, but in a sense of there's one thing, whatever that thing is, that's of love, that's of grace, that's of abundance, that is the ultimate authority that dictates, what happens at the end of the day, who I pray to at the end of the night, who when I'm going through a rough time, who I go to, or who is there for me. Whatever that thing is, I don't necessarily know, and I don't claim to know it all. But I do claim that there is something there, something in our hearts. If an 11-year-old girl can survive a terrorist attack in her pursuit of a better life through education, then you can fucking go to a protest. You can write to your politicians. You can do something that's going to affect positive, meaningful change in your society. And that goes for anywhere on earth. It's time that we stop using divisive language. Left, right, duh. It's okay to label things as they are, but it's not okay to separate from the whole of the collective that you live with. That's your country. You're all Canadian. We are all Canadian. We're all U.S. What I mean is, we're people of the earth. And we can desensitize ourselves. We can separate ourselves from the issues at hand, when we feel mentally that there's a distance, when there's really no distance. What happens to someone else happens to me. What happens to me happens to someone else. I don't want to live in a way where it is tolerable and acceptable to commit a hate crime against someone, where free speech is suppressed rather than explored. When did it become such a taboo to have a new idea, a different idea than what most people are used to? I am one who loves change. Change in general. I like the new. I know there's people out there who do not like change. And to that I say, get over yourself. Through our greatest trials come our greatest triumphs. Canada was not built on people who did not get involved in politics, who did not get involved in human rights issues. It was literally built on the lives of, 16 to 18 to 20 to 30-year-olds sent across the fucking ocean to go die for your freedom today. That was only 80-something years ago. Canada was only born 150 years ago. Something, you know what I mean? There's still more work to do. The most dangerous thing in a society is complacency. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it did fall pretty fucking quickly. And I say this as a First Nations person. I think what Canada has and what Canada holds in its values are incredible. I think the rights and freedoms that I have also been given, I feel like almost honorarily, because I'm a Toquat Nation citizen, is beautiful. But what does it matter if you do not exercise your rights? What does it matter if you have the right to vote, if you have the right to freedom of expression, if you have the right to freedom of protest, if you don't do the things? If you don't participate, then what is the fucking point? There is no point. At that point, there is no point. You might as well just sit home and do nothing for the rest of your fucking life. There's more to life than just going to coffee, going to post on social media, going to do this or going to do that. There's more to life. There's a responsibility to the people who come after us to ensure that they enjoy the same rights and responsibilities, to ensure that they're not dealing with a fucking shit show when we're gone from this earth. And we're losing sight of the purpose. We're losing sight of our traditions. We're losing sight. We're losing our voices. We're losing our power. This is a matter of, are my kids going to be able to eat, or are we going to be in another war? Are my kids going to enjoy saying what they want, being able to be educated, having the opportunities that we have today? Or are we going to, through action or inaction, through complacency or direct voting for whatever, a lack of opportunity to change, a lack of opportunity to get better? Because Canada is a special place where you truly can come here and make a difference and make a life for yourself. You can get involved in the community. We have free food available at churches, at community centers. We have places where people can shower. We have the resources. There's places where that just doesn't exist, and we've become complacent and we've become very used to this way of living, that we forget that there are people, and I reiterate it because it's true, there's places on earth where they truly have nothing. Maybe they got a Quran. Maybe they got a Bible. If they do, maybe they can eat, fucking dry, raw corn. If. Maybe they can have some dirty water. That's if they can get it. That's if they have, We get so caught up in fucking cars and money. And I want cars. I want money. These are things that I do want. But I'm not ignorant and I'm not arrogant to the fact that these are privileges. These are luxuries. True fucking luxuries. You drive the shittiest car, you're better off than, like 99% of the fucking planet. You get educated, you're better off than 99% of the fucking planet. And people get complacent. People get arrogant. And it's like, you're still a human being. You're still going to die one day. Are you going to die being a shitty, useless individual? And I do mean useless. That doesn't mean you're not worthy. That doesn't mean you're not, granted the same rights and freedom. That doesn't mean I don't think you should live a good life still. But if you're not affecting a real, meaningful, positive change in the world, you're fucking useless. I pay taxes, I do this, I do... Okay, but how do you treat the homeless person who wants $1 or who wants some food? How do you treat the elderly? How do you view foreign countries? Meaning countries that aren't Canada or the United States. Who do you donate to? When have you bought a meal for someone less fortunate? Okay, now let's flip it. When was the last time you looked down on somebody because you perceived that they had less value? Or they weren't living a life that you thought they should, either through a religious context or otherwise? When was the last time you raged at someone on the road? When was the last time you helped an elderly person cross the road, or picked up some trash? Or when was the last time you littered? When was the last time you completely ignored someone who was needing your help? When was the last time you talked to your mother, if you have good relations, or your grandparents, or gone to a family reunion, or even just had a call with an old friend? We have the luxury to be depressed in this society. We have the luxury to be anxious. We have the luxury to complain. When you're focused on your next meal, or just fucking surviving, avoiding bombs all day, the last thing on your fucking mind is what Becky thinks. The last thing on your mind is, oh, I don't have $1 million. The last thing on your mind is, oh, I only got 2 likes on Instagram. Those are the last things. Those are on a completely separate universe when you're concerned about food. So my message here is, be grateful, take pride in our great countries, and be responsible and participate. And if you're not willing, then shut the fuck up, don't complain, and stay out of the way of the people who are going to make the change, the real positive, meaningful change. Now let's bring it to a bit more recent history. In the 1950s and 60s, the United States was governed by quote-unquote Jim Crow laws, a system designed to keep Black Americans as second-class citizens through segregation and systemic disenfranchisement. Dr. King didn't just use his voice to complain about the present. He used it to architect a future. In his quote-unquote I Have a Dream speech, he used the power of rhetoric to paint a picture of a world so beautiful and logically sound that the quote-unquote powers that be could no longer justify the status quo. He made the ugly of racism look outdated and the beauty of equality look inevitable. His voice turned a local protest into a national mandate for change. And this is one that we all know. If you grew up and you live in Canada or North America, or the United States, you know of Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream. Well, I do have a dream. And my dream and my hope is that we live and we can create a world full of freedom, abundance, grace, opportunity, love, respect. One where we don't have families starving while the ultra rich get more fucking rich. Where we have an accountable society and accountable governments. There is no reason why we shouldn't have them. Why do we gotta change? Why not? We either grow and evolve to match the problems we face, or we die. Physically, or mentally and spiritually. I'm not a religious person, but aside from religion, aside from everything else, just as human to human, we should have respectful discourse. We should have and welcome differences of opinion. We should be able to have open and free debate. We should have a true sovereign press who reports the truth, not a narrative, but these are the facts. Decide what you think. Not, here's what we think and that's what you should think too. And if you question it, you're crazy, or we're going to blacklist you, or, we should be able to feed everybody. I'm not saying give everybody a free ride, and which I don't think is a bad thing either. If we can give people a free ride, why not? But what I mean is, our fundamental necessities like food, water, shelter, connection, these are things that should be non-negotiable to have for everybody in our society. And I don't see why not. Because it doesn't make a dollar. There are things that are invaluable. There's things that you don't put a price on, that are priceless. And this one man, Martin Luther King Jr., sparked a revolution of the mind. And the effects have reverberated to this very day. And it sparked discussions of inequality on a systemic level, not just between people, but, hey, systemically in government and policy. That's usually where the issue resides. So, Autumn Peltier was, I hope I said that name right. Autumn Peltier is an Anishinaabe water activist from the Wikwemkoong First Nation in Canada. She grew up seeing Indigenous communities being told by the government that clean water was a quote-unquote luxury they would have to wait for, despite living in the most water-rich nations on Earth. At just 12 years old, Autumn was brought face-to-face with the Prime Minister of Canada. Instead of being intimidated by the quote-unquote power in the room, she used her voice to issue a sovereign check. She told him she was unhappy with the choices he made. She took that same message to the United Nations, speaking for the water that has no voice. She shifted the conversation from political bureaucracy to human survival, proving that you are never too young to hold power accountable. And I don't know about you, but I want, and I dream and I hope that our younger generations find their voice and find their own power of humility, of grace, of education, to, keep holding our governments and our institutions accountable. This seems like a big change. It is a big change, but it's a necessary change. And the alternative is something that's so destitute that I don't like thinking about it. And the key thing here is that today we have the opportunity to change. We have the technology to fuel the change. We have the education and the resources to fuel this change. We are on the precipice of something either really great or something really miserable. We have the opportunity, and unlike any other point of human history, we hadn't had this kind of opportunity. We could make lives, everyday lives, so great. In the true meaning of great. We could make our lives great. We could make our societies and our nations and, our people great. We could work together. We could share ideas. We could improve our ideas. We could implement change. We just gotta participate. We just gotta voice our opinion. We gotta use our rights and our responsibilities and our freedoms to enact change. First within, then without. Connect with people who think the same way, but be open to all differences of opinion, all different perspectives, because that's where the solution lies, not in just one, but in the many. And I hope this was cohesive. I'm sick, it's getting late, I'm 18 past scheduled upload time. So, this has been the late night cool down. Hopefully by next episode I'll be feeling, better. And I do hope this was cohesive. I do hope that you took something from this. And I hope because I don't like to listen back to my episodes, but I should. But I hope when I do end up listening to this back that it makes sense and that I'm like, fuck yeah, and not, holy fuck, I need to delete that, right? So, may God have mercy on my soul and God bless you. Best of luck to you all who listen. And thank you for tuning into Late Night Cool Down. And my apologies for uploading a bit late. I don't like to announce and then upload late. I gotta be a bit more disciplined on, recording and stuff. And when I say I'm gonna upload, I gotta upload. Not delay. But so long as it gets done, it gets done. So this has been the Late Night Cool Down. I'm your sick host, both in the sick, I'm sick, the sickest, but also actually sick host. And thank you for allowing me to express my freedom of thought, my freedom of opinion, my freedom of expression, my freedom of words or whatever, you know what I mean. And that's really what it has been about. I've just been unleashing, fuck. And okay, one last opinion before I wrap it up. I love swear words, and it doesn't make you uneducated to say fuck. This has been the Late Night Cool Down. Go follow us everywhere. Stay tuned. Season 2 is going to be big. Bigger than big. Thank you. Bye.